Hello guys, ClavisKey here, and welcome to the first episode of my podcast. Fun fact, by the way, I still don't have a name for my podcast. I'll probably have a name by the time this is uploaded, but I currently have no name for my podcast, so just see this as like a pilot episode of things. So you may be wondering, Clavis, why are you doing a podcast? Is it because everyone is doing a podcast? And partly, maybe yes, but also no. Like, this isn't gonna be like your classic podcast like White Toast's podcast. I'm not gonna invite a YouTuber every episode or something. I'm mostly doing this because I want to use my podcast as a way to talk about current relevant FNAF topics without making a dedicated, very fancy edited video about it. Because so far with my videos, I'm more the kind of person to talk about topics I'm passionate about in this franchise. And like story topics, book topics. I'm not the kind of person like Dawko or really popular FNAF theorists where I drop a video reacting to a new trailer or something. So this podcast will be like a way for me to comment on relevant FNAF topics or new FNAF theories without making a dedicated video about it. Like a really detailed edited video, I mean with that. So, for example, if like a new theory blows up and people wonder, oh, what's Clavis's opinion on this? I'm gonna just make a podcast episode about it. Instead of like making a really edited video saying, I think your theory is wrong, and giving a bunch of counterpoints, because I don't really want to do that. Unless I'm really passionate about a certain topic, I'm not willing to make a full edited video of it. Also, secondly, because my edited videos take so much time because I'm not good at editing yet and I put so much effort into it, it also causes those to not release when I want them to release. So also to have like a more consistent uploading schedule, I'll also make these podcast episodes. However, that doesn't mean that every week I'll release like one of these episodes. I'll record them whenever I have something relevant to talk about. Like if a new trailer drops, or if a new teaser drops, or if there's enough things to talk about. This first episode, I won't go too deep into FNAF topics yet. I'll mostly will explain why I'm doing these podcast episodes and giving you little updates about my current projects and stuff. So this podcast is also a way for me to communicate like, oh, here's how I'm doing, here's how my channel is doing, this is what I'm working on. I'm not dead, guys. You don't have to wait a half a year again for a next video. So the first thing I want to cover in this like pilot episode is to go over the projects I'm currently working on. Again, this is the first time I'm talking and doing a podcast like this, so it will be a bit awkward maybe. But I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to doing non-scripted things. I talk often to myself, so normally this should go smoothly once I'm comfortable recording myself while not reading off a script. But first I'll go off with my projects, because my latest project was already like at least 3 months ago, I think, the Andrew video. So it's not that I've not been doing anything this past 3 months. I've been working hard on my next video, which is surprisingly not a book video for once, because I've done like 2 Into the Pit videos in a row. So next video will be a FNAF World video. Because in recent months, I've seen people discuss more often, mostly on Twitter, the topic of FNAF World's lore. So I want to make a full video where I replay FNAF World. I replayed all of FNAF World, at least most of it. I haven't done the rainbow ending. So I replayed FNAF World, reanalyzed the story, and I'm gonna make a video about my opinions on the story, about why I think the story was made, how the story ties into the other stories, and what it means about the lore. I'm also already planning to do a little follow-up video, because with the narrative I'm telling, there's a lot of details I won't be able to cover in this video. For example, one thing I'm not gonna cover, which people are gonna definitely mention in the comments, is Old Man Consequences. Old Man Consequences is not really relevant to the narrative I'm making, but that doesn't mean he doesn't fit in it. It's just like Old Man Consequences is such a question mark of a character that if I start trying to explain what he is, that immediately the flow of the script is going out of the window. So he and other topics on FNAF World, like how does FNAF World connect to Ultimate Custom Night, and how does like the ending with the happiest day with the angel or the person with when you go into the lake, how does that connect to FNAF World and the bigger lore? Those are like mostly the Old Man Consequences topics, and mostly the appearances of FNAF World after FNAF World, those are topics I'll cover in the follow-up video. So my follow-up video will be kind of covering the topics that I wasn't able to cover in the main video. You have to realize the main video is 3 chapters, and I've only edited 1 chapter so far, and it's already 20 minutes. So it will be a pretty long video if every section is going to be like 20 minutes. So it's probably going to be one of my longer videos again. But I hope it will do good, because I'm really proud of the script. I'm really happy with the script. Even though I summarize a lot of stuff again, I'm the kind of person to summarize a lot of things. But it was necessary, because a lot of people do not understand how a lot of the plot points in FNAF connect with each other. So I'm kind of forced to be like, hey guys, all these things intertwine. So here's a summary of how all these things intertwine with one another. But I'm not going to spoil more of the video. You'll have to watch it when it releases. I'm not going to go on a whole discussion what the video is about. But basically a whole video about FNAF World's lore. I just have to do a lot of still drawing and stuff for that one. Maybe this one will have a bit of less drawings because I'm more focusing on the editing and the gameplay recording. Apart from that, if you follow my Twitter, if you follow my social media, I've also posted a trailer of my next short film project. It's actually a project that's already been done for a year. It's similar, if you guys seen my Pinocchio short film, it's gonna be similar to that, where it's like a personal project I made for school I'm gonna upload on my YouTube channel. The difference with this and my Pinocchio short film is that this one was originally made in Dutch, so I'm working currently on a full English dub of the project. It's called Foxy and Wolfie, and it's like kind of a puppetry project I worked on. I already released a trailer of it like last month on my Twitter and on my Blue Sky. So check my socials if you want to see the trailer. I also wanted to upload it on my YouTube, but it was kind of like it's a really short teaser thing. I didn't really want to upload it. So if you want to see it, it's on my socials. Apart from that, I'm also planning out future projects. I'm writing down future topics for videos. One example is I've already kind of tried this out on Twitter saying, hey, is this like an interesting idea? And this is like a series I want to do. I've wanted to do for a while, but I was like not sure what direction to go into with it. And that's a silly summary with ClavisKey. It's basically a series for me to summarize the books. But like in a silly way. I was not sure for a long time if I wanted to make serious summaries, like really serious analyzation summaries like Gibby did, like my Into the Pit video, or if I wanted to do like more a fun thing. Because mostly, a lot of ways people learn about the books recently is through fun ways. For example, the Jackie's Box song. Now suddenly the wider FNAF fandom knows who David Murray is because of the Jackie's Box song. So I'm kind of like, I want to do a bit of both. Silly summaries with ClavisKey will be like one section where I summarize the story in a silly way. It's really reminiscent to, if you're familiar with the Warrior Cats fandom, if you're part of that, really similar to Moon Kitty's I Spoiled Everything videos, where she gives like a basically really silly summary of the original plot. And I'm planning to do that basically with my puppetry. In my first 3 videos, I used my little paper puppets. I haven't used those in a while, but I want to bring those back in the form of silly summaries. So the first section of the video will be like a silly summary, so it's just summarizing it as fun with jokes and stuff with the puppets. And then the second half will be more the analyzing part and my opinion part. So there will be like a one silly section and a more serious analyzation section afterwards. Also throughout I'll give a few quotes, so the most important things you get the quotes of directly. But it'll basically be kind of like a juggling thing where I juggle the funny thing and the serious aspect. So the video will be like 2 parts, the summary part and the more analyzation part. That will be a way for people to experience the book in a more fun way, for me to communicate those things more in a funny way. Because I really like to do funny things, it's just difficult to do it with the books, because a lot of people are not familiar with the books. And it's kind of like making a parody. It's really difficult to make a parody of something if you don't understand the original source material. So it's really difficult for me to joke about the books if the people are not familiar with what I'm joking about. So that's something I'll do in the future. Definitely something I'll do in the future. It's just I need to plan things out. I also have a few topics I want to cover in future videos. Like one I really want to cover is, I've said this one for a while, I think, and that's the story of Help Wanted. Like not the book, surprisingly not the book. It's about the indie storyline in the original Help Wanted VR game. So the story about the indie developer making the indie games based off the rumors. And how that storyline is often misunderstood. Because you constantly hear this complaint about, oh well, past FNAF games like FNAF 1 till 6 got retconned because of the indie game developer storyline. when Scott already really early on confirmed that wasn't the case. And that's something till this day that continues to be miscommunicated and keeps being spread of like, the past games are unreliable now, when I think that's such a big, giant misunderstanding of the text. And that's something that I really want to clarify. One video also have been on the back of my mind for a while has been a whole video about the Charlie trilogy, specifically Charlie Bot as a character. How the human-robot characters are often misunderstood, how that's misinterpreted, how most robot theories misinterpret the original context of the Charlie Bot. And also something people probably want me to do, but I'm probably just gonna cover my opinions in this podcast episode in the second half, is my opinions on Return to the Pit. I made 2 videos about Into the Pit, one about the game, one about the original story, and people probably wonder now, how do you feel about the interactive novel? And I haven't really commented that much on the interactive novel, even not on my social media, because I'm generally confused by it. Like, Return to the Pit is my personal Waterloo, basically. It's my personal villain, it's the thing that's in my path that I can't get across. I really am so confused about this book and why it exists. And I can invent multiple reasons why the book is the way it is, but all of those reasons will kind of sound like me coping, or will kind of sound like me trying to disregard the book, when that's really silly of me to do, and I can't really do that without evidence. Where I kind of feel like, this book was not intended to be this way, but again, that's a kind of a cop-out answer. That's kind of a hypocritical answer, mostly coming from me who constantly defends the books like this. So for me to say like, this book is just not accurate, shrug, or it was like not fact-checked enough, shrug, that's like an excuse you can make with every or any FNAF media. So it's not a fair point for me to make without evidence. So again, I'm kind of choosing to kind of sit back, maybe wait for anyone that worked on this book to comment on why it is the way it is, because currently I don't really have an answer for it. This book has so much confusing things going for it. And if it's not canon, then you have the issue of like, does that mean the week before is canon? I mean, probably is, but then you have the issue of like, what does it say about VIP and what does it say about Escape the Pizza? Again, it causes a lot of issues. It causes so much confusion and so much issues that it's really difficult for me to come to one solid verdict of like, this is Return to the Pit and this is what's going on with it. Because either way, even if I find an even find a reason to justify my feelings about it, even then there's like an issue of like, what does this say about the other books in the series? Because then there's no consistency with canonicity. But apart from that, I'll probably go into it later, because again, I thought it was just gonna be a video today with me summarizing what the future of the channel is gonna be, but I don't think I'm gonna fill enough minutes for that, so I'm probably gonna talk about this later. I'm gonna first summarize it, second half Return to the Pit. The last thing I want to address is that I'm also working on a few little collaborations, nothing big yet, and also nothing that's gonna release soon yet. I've been in contact with a few YouTubers. It's still nothing big. I'm still bad at socializing. I'm still number one person that's bad at socializing with other people in the field. But I'm working on one project that's won't release until next year, and one project I may be in. But those are not projects that are gonna release soon or anytime soon. So I can't really say anything about them because they're also not my projects. They're just projects I'm a part of. So I can't really say anything about them, I can't really reveal anything about them, I can just say, maybe you'll see me somewhere else in the future. But again, don't get your hopes up, it's not gonna be something giant. I'm not gonna appear on GT Live or something. Anyways, that's kinda it. That's kinda it for the channel. I'm just working hard on things. I'm also balancing my channel with my schoolwork, with my studies, so I really don't have a lot of time to work on things. And I hopefully have more time in the future. But just know things are in process. Check my socials if you want little teasers of future projects. There are at least 3 videos in the works, including this one. So again, my short movie should release sometime this year. My FNAF World video should release as soon as possible, and this podcast probably will be released when you're seeing this, because otherwise you won't be seeing it. I'm also maybe open in the future to do collabs with this podcast, but I have to look into how I'll do this, because again, I'm just a little silly goober recording this on my phone, so I don't have a way to record Discord channels or Discord calls yet, or to do live streams. I don't have the professional things for that yet. I'm just doing it with what I have at the moment. So be a little understanding for me being a little not professional, being a little goober that's not professional, a really unprofessional little goober. Anyways, I think that's it for the channel news. I thought this was gonna take longer, but no, I spent most of the time I thought it would take longer, but no, I pretty much summarized it pretty quickly. I think I just talk pretty fast if I'm stressed. Now to relevant FNAF news. Wow, I did not expect to get to this point in the video. But there are a few topics I haven't publicly talked much about. For example, Return to the Pit. I think as like the number one book defender and as the number one Andrew stan and as the number one Into the Pit analyzer at this point, it is weird that I haven't commented yet on Return to the Pit. It's because Return to the Pit is a really confusing book for me to talk about. I've only read it recently because I was not really interested in reading it. I'm one of the few people that in this fandom that actively engages with the live reading, so I already knew kind of about what the live reading what was about, but I don't want to really judge a product until I've interacted with myself, so I didn't really engage with the book myself yet. Last month I finally read myself, and I'm kind of left with questions. I'm kind of similar to Mr. Desk Fan's video on it, where Mr. Desk Fan was also kind of like just trying to find ways to work around this book. I mean, not really work around this book, like try to connect this book with what we already have. One thing people often comment on this book that they think makes this the superior canon version, because we're at this point in the franchise where people argue about which media is the superior version of like a certain story, which I already have issues with. But people have been seeing this as the superior version of things, when I think if we treat this as like the game's canon version of Into the Pit, it causes way more issues than just accepting Stitchline or accepting the game as canon. I think this book causes more issues, that people are more easily accepting to this because the book kinda addresses an issue a lot of people have with the main story. But let's start at the beginning. So again, the interactive novels, I've not talked about much about them because I thought of like, mostly with the week before, everyone has been covering the week before. I don't have much to say about the week before that anyone else hasn't said before. Week before, decent book, a bit overhyped to me, but a really well-written book, a really fun book. Also just a generally well put together interactive novel. I really like how the book is divided into like 5 night sections. Yeah, I just think it's a really well put together book. VIP was also a lot of fun. I'm kind of surprised it's the only book where you really have to write down a lot because of the point system and because you have to keep up with the bunch of coins you collect. VIP, technically, even though it's free, is the only book where you actually have to note things down. With the week before, like, yeah, sure, you have to note down the items you collect, but you don't really have to note down the coins or the points. But again, I'm rambling again, so let's start at the beginning, the interactive novels. New series of books, haven't talked much about them, and I think they're pretty good. I'm gonna be really honest, I know a lot of people prefer the interactive novel way of storytelling, but I'm kind of more a narrative person, more of like a linear storyline person. So even though I enjoy these books, I'm really getting used to the reading style and the writing style of these. Mostly because, again, I know a lot of people have like nostalgia and like a history with interactive novels, but I don't. Like, my history with interactive novels is literally just nothing. This is like my first interactive book, my first interactive novel, my first choose your own adventure thing. So I've never like had to engage with this kind of writing style before. There's a lot of getting used to for me, but it's been fun. It's like different, and I think people enjoy it because it's different and it's more similar to the way the FNAF games are structured. But I think the first 2 books were a solid lineup. VIP, not really lore relevant, but really useful for the Tales debate. Again, it was a book where it's kind of like, yeah, it feels like a scrapped Tales from the Pizza Bike story that was kind of extended into an interactive novel. It's basically your villain of the week kind of story with the pig and the new characters having to avoid the pig. But I like the storytelling, I like the world building. I felt that the world building in this book with the Pizza Bike was like way more solid than in the previous books. I think that's mostly because the previous books, like Tales, were written while Security Breach was being developed. So the books weren't able to fully characterize the characters well and the location well because, well, they were describing a location that wasn't finished yet, about a game that wasn't finished yet when these books were in development. But again, this is clearly written after Security Breach because, again, the characters are really characterized well. Monty, Roxanne, Freddy are really, really characterized well. Chica also, the bit we see of her, but we don't really see much of Chica in the book. Again, Glamrock Bonnie is finally mentioned in one of the books. Again, in Tales, they kind of ignore Glamrock Bonnie existing most of the time. There's like little Easter eggs that maybe hint to Glamrock Bonnie, but you really have to squint to even see Glamrock Bonnie anywhere in Tales. Like, oh yeah, Storyteller mentions there's like one animatronic in like a Bonnie bowl, but that's kind of it. And maybe they hint at Glamrock Bonnie by saying the Mimic has rabbit ears and is a guitarist, but that's kind of all you'll get with Glamrock Bonnie in the books. Also, there's also like a little mention of a Bonnie animatronic in the Tiger Rock story in the VR simulation. There, in the future Pizza Plex VR simulation, there's a Bonnie animatronic that's mentioned. That goes off a slide. But that's kind of it. That's like all the Glamrock Bonnie things you'll get in the books before VIP. Because VIP really is like, hey, Glamrock Bonnie is here. Here's Glamrock Bonnie. We don't see him, but they're real like, hey, Glamrock Bonnie is a character, guys. He's canon. He's a character in this franchise. Which I really appreciate. And again, it was just a little side story. But it could possibly explain some of the world building. Could explain... I don't know, again, a lot of people don't like the books if they're not lore relevant. But I really appreciate the books if they just add world building to it. And I think VIP did a really good job at world building. And a really good job at connecting tales with the current games. Because again, it basically just confirms the things are already assumed. VIP confirms a lot of things that already assumed were the case. I think the best example is like the expansions. It reveals that the Pizzaplex is round. Because again, one of the main characters, the younger brother, explains like, oh, the Pizzaplex is shaped like a pizza. Which is also said in stories like Haps and a lot of other stories in Tales from the Pizzaplex. So again, it reinforces the thing of like, oh, the Pizzaplex is round. But then the story also says, oh, the Pizzaplex is gonna get an expansion. So if the main structure of the Pizzaplex was a circle and then a new building attachment was added onto it, then of course the Pizzaplex isn't a circle anymore in the games because that shape would have been changed with adding a new building to it. So it explains how we went from Circleplex to the current game's Pizzaplex. It also explains like one thing I've assumed for a while, and that's that the daycare attendant was basically the idea that there wasn't a previous daycare attendant. There was like a popular theory going around that there was a previous daycare attendant. Maybe Glamrock Foxy was the original daycare attendant. Again, this originated because Bobbydot says that the Sun and Moon animatronic, like Sundrop, Moondrop, the daycare attendant, they originally were a stage animatronic, but later were repurposed for the daycare. And a lot of people interpreted this as like, oh, this means that the daycare originally had a different daycare attendant. But I just assumed of like, oh no, there originally wasn't a daycare. And the Sun and Moon animatronic was in the Fairy Tale Castle area that's mentioned in the Tales book. Basically, the Tales books mention a Fairy Tale Castle area. That's the theater, the original theater that's in the main lobby. And again, this main theater is themed as a fairy tale castle on a cloud. And I always connected this castle to the castle we see in the daycare. I thought like, oh, this is really similar to the castle the daycare attendant comes out of. And then Bobbydot says like, oh, the daycare attendant used to be a stage animatronic to work at the theater. So I assumed, oh, the old fairy tale castle was supposed to be Sun's attraction. Then it got removed and it got repurposed for the daycare when the daycare was built. And VIP confirms that, yeah, the daycare wasn't an opening attraction, the daycare was built afterwards. So it confirms that. Which again confirmed my assumption that the fairy tale castle at one point was removed, and then the Sun was moved from the theater to the daycare to be the daycare attendant, which again confirmed it to me. That was an assumption I had for a long time. So again, it looks less likely that there is like a previous daycare attendant. I never was like a fan of that theory, but I think VIP kind of like kills that theory also. Unless you assume there was an original daycare attendant when it was built, but I think that's not likely. It's not very likely. But again, that's kind of it for VIP. It's just kind of like, again, world building, Pizzaplex world building. Also, the Help Wanted 2 carousel is mentioned, which also was shown in Claustrophobia. Again, a lot of details that just connect the past Circleplex in the Tales books with the Pizzaplex from the games. VIP is basically the bridge between the Tales books and the Security Breach game, which I appreciate. Even though there's a random pig there, I can ramble on about the pig. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the pig is. Anyways, that's VIP. So a really strong start, I think. I enjoy the story for what it is. I don't expect every book to be a lore dump. But then you had the week before. And the week before was like, again, everybody and their mom's favorite book in the franchise. I enjoy the book. Like, I really enjoy the book. But I also think it's overhyped. Like, this clearly feels like the book that was like, oh, well, now we'll do the fan service. This was literally the fan service book, basically. Oh, you want FNAF, you want Freddy Fazbear in your book? Here you have Freddy Fazbear in your book. That's what this book feels like. Here you have Freddy Fazbear. Which I appreciate. I don't think there's anything wrong with fan service. This franchise should do more fan service every now and then. But I also think it's kind of overhyped because of it. Like, don't get me wrong, I really, really like Ralph as a character. I think he's properly written. But at the same time, I don't think the book is as lore important or as necessary to read as people make it out to be. Like, I think it's a really good story, and I think it's a good character study of a character we didn't know much about. That's why I think it's the most valuable about it. It's like a really good character study of Fungi and expanding his character. But do you necessarily need to know who Fungi is to understand the lore? Not really, I think. Not really. But that doesn't mean it's not a good book. I just think a lot of reasons people use this book as debates like the date or who did the Bite of 87 or I don't think the book really gives an answer to that. The book just basically, in my eyes, just reinforces ideas we've been already thinking about. It just kind of reinforces some debates and adds evidence to them, but it doesn't really solidly confirm anything. The only big confirmation I think it gives is kind of killing the Cassie's dad is Jeremy from FNAF 2 theory, since Phone Guy says that guy doesn't talk anymore, so that makes it very unlikely for Cassie's dad to be Jeremy Fitzgerald from FNAF 2. But again, that's kind of it. That's kind of it that really confirms to me. But still a good book. I really like it. It's just, again, I can't enjoy it as much as other stories in the franchise. Personally, I wouldn't call it the best FNAF book, my favorite FNAF book, because it generally just doesn't really appease me. Like, I'm not really quickly convinced that the writing of a book is specifically the best writing in the franchise because it does the most fan service. Don't get me wrong though, the author of this book is really good. Really, really, really good author. Definitely one of the best authors this franchise has, but again, I don't think it's one of the best stories, because I'm personally more of a person that wants a story with depth, with a lot of thematic stuff, and this book doesn't really have that. Which again, it doesn't need that, it's an interactive novel, it's supposed to be a fun book. The point of an interactive novel is to just have as much possible endings as possible and to explore as much as possible. But it's not gonna be like a story like The Man in the Wolf 1280 where it's like a linear story and there's themes in the story and the story has structure. Again, it has different things going for it, and I think I'm more of an enjoyer of a linear story arc where it's like a clear beginning, middle, ending than the interactive approach. Which doesn't mean I hate these books, I still really like these books for what they are. I just have a clear preference for the straightforward narrative, linear storytelling. That's a preference. I get why people prefer this one over the others. But I can't in my right mind say, oh, I enjoyed The Week Before just as much as The Man in the Wolf 1280 or The Real Jake or stories that have really deep themes and really resonate with me. I can't put it on the same level. Because it's kind of like, well, yeah, people prefer this one because of the fan service. It's not because of the deeper themes. Which again, is fine. Like, my preferences lie with the deeper themes and the exploration of thematic elements and the underlying text. While with other people, it of course lies with, oh, I just want a fun book with Freddy Fazbear jumpscaring me. Or just a book that actually goes into the lore. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just not the kind of person to do that. I'm more of the person that likes the stories that have something to tell to me. But again, personal preference. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm not being here like, I'm the English major that understands the deep storyline and you guys are just silly and only care about Freddy Fazbear. I'm not saying that. Totally get why people prefer this book over the others. It's just a personal preference. Sorry, I'm a big fan of The Man in the Wolf 1280. I think that's such a good story. Anyways, so that book was really good, really consistent with the lore. Didn't really solve much, but was a really good way to expand the universe, which I think people wanted for a long time. Just a book that doesn't really solve everything, but a book that is a really good companion to expanding the universe of the games and expanding what we already have. And I think it's a good balance between lore relevance and being a companion to an already existing storyline. But then the day happened. Then we got to the next retelling of Into the Pit, Return to the Pit. The book that basically made me turn into stone and made me unable to talk about. First, I was just uninterested. First, I was kind of like, oh, this is probably a novelization of the game. Probably like how the week before is kind of like FNAF 1, but in book form. This is probably just going to be Into the Pit game with book form. But no, it was even worse. It was even worse than that. My low expectations were even like pushed into the ground with this book. Which I really hate to say, by the way. I'm not saying this book is badly written. Because the author, Adrian Kress, is such a talented author. She is the same author of the Bandy books, for example, Dreams Come to Life and Fade to Black. And those are like my favorite indie books ever. Like those two Bandy novels, I'll admit, I like those Bandy novels more than any FNAF book. Those are some of the best indie horror books to ever release. Mostly Dreams Come to Life. Dreams Come to Life is a masterpiece. Too bad they retconned it out of the game story, but it's a masterpiece. And I'm sad that they don't really acknowledge these books a lot. Again, Adrian Kress is such a talented author. But she was done so dirty by the franchise by being like, oh, hey, Adrian Kress, have this story that already exists. You can write like the 4th version of this story. Here you go. Congratulations. They did my girl so dirty with this book. And I'm kind of upset to say that I hate this book. Because again, Adrian Kress is such a talented author. And I feel bad about it. I really feel bad about it. Because again, I don't think it's Adrian Kress's fault. It's purely her being done dirty by the franchise, by her being given already existing story. Because if you gave her a new story, I think she would have done better. But no, you gave her the already existing story. I just think that's really unfortunate. Because I think Adrian Kress is really good in writing, but you let her help her develop the story. She's really good in that. Again, I've said multiple times they should hire Adrian Kress to write the actual Bendy game story, but whatever, they're not doing that sadly enough. But I'm not gonna go into Bendy, that's like a whole different story. Anyways, Return to the Pit. Return to the Pit is, again, my personal, I'm repeating myself, it's my personal enemy. it's like my Waterloo again. This book. Firstly, before I get into the lore things, I just think from all the interactive novels, this is just the weakest interactive novel in general. There's not much interactive elements, there's not much items to collect, and if you collect items, most of them don't do anything. Most of them serve no purpose apart from the flashlight, and the rabbit ears will lead you to like a secret ending, game over. And the Freddy action figure does nothing, it just exists. Here's your traced Funko render, there you go, Freddy Fazbear. So apart from the golden coin and the flashlight, there's not really a reason to collect any of them. Like, yeah, the rabbit ears will lead to like a separate ending, but like, it's just to get a unique game over, and that's kind of it. And I think the story is just like really badly structured. Like, the first half of the book is just kind of like nothing interactive. Every bad choice you make in like the first half of the story, the first half, leads to the same exact game over. Because you're not going to Jeff's Pizza, or you're not going into the ball pit, or you're being like, I'm not going to Jeff's Pizza anymore. It's just gonna lead into your relationship with your father falling apart. It's the same exact ending. So every game over in the first half is almost the exact same game over. So the moral of the story is, if you don't go to Jeff's Pizza, your relationship with your dad is ruined. Jeff saved my relationship with my father. It's not really that the story gets more interactive until you see the MCI, you escape the pit, and you have the dinner scene with your rabbit father. When that dinner scene happens, that's when the story starts to split off. That's when the interactive novel elements start to be introduced into the book, actually. Like, this book has a thing, and this book mostly is more noticeable in the second half. Where this book has a thing of kind of like, you have two choices. Make the choice you did in the original story, or make the choice you didn't do in the original story. And if you make the other choice, you immediately die. The book just kind of punishes you for going against the grain. It just straight up punishes you for doing anything else. And you are like, well, Clavis, because that story is set in stone as the canon ending, so they kind of have to push you into the narrative, which I get that. But there's also not much exploration aside from that. Like, again, with the week before, yet besides the canon ending where Fungi dies, there's this whole different 6th night ending you can unlock. There's a whole different storyline that canonically did not happen. Like, yeah, explore this whole new narrative that canonically didn't happen, but still gives you new information and still a fun time to explore. Return to the Pit immediately kills you off the second you go off the path. It immediately is like, well, brother, you did not follow the narrative you had to follow. You're gonna die now, and the rabbit kills you, or most likely runs you over with a car, because it happens a lot in this book. But again, the narrative really, really punishes you for not listening, which is really unfortunate. Then the next issue is, even when you make a wrong choice, the book is kinda letting you know, hey, maybe you're making a wrong choice. Winks at the camera, you're making a wrong choice. Don't make the wrong choice. I think the best example is of the bedroom scene. So you have to escape the house and you can't pass the bedroom. The bathroom. The bathroom. So you choose to go to the bedroom, but then there's a separate page being like, are you sure you want to go there? Are you sure you want to do this? So so it's kind of like going to like a page, and the page, going to a web page, and the web page being like, are you sure you want to delete your account? Are you sure you want to do this? Like, the book does this a lot where you kind of like want to make the wrong choice, but then the book's kind of like, are you sure you want to make the wrong choice? And then the page doesn't really exist. The page only exists to be like a warning screen of like, are you sure you want to do this? So the book even like sometimes discourages you from making the wrong choice, which is annoying because then you're not gonna get the original classic, original story game overs. Like the book actively does not want you to explore, which really, really annoys me. Because again, the point of an interactive novel should be that the book wants you to explore, but this book really is like, are you sure you want to explore? Are you sure you want to go down that path? But again, that's my biggest complaint. Also, most of the endings just, but that's going into the lore section. Now the lore section. Why do people think this version is the superior canon version? 2 reasons. 1, this is part of the same series it has the week before. And not anyone claims the week before is not canon. Everyone wants to use the week before as lore, because the week before is a story people actually like, and it's a story that actually would help with the lore. So nobody wants to throw the fungi lore out of the window. So if it's part of the same series, you would assume that it's also canon by using common sense. Secondly, this is a book that people used to say Andrew is not canon. That's it. Like, me and my friend Caslin talk about this often, but most people's issues with the books always come back to Andrew. Everything always comes back to Andrew. The source of the book canonicity debate always comes back to Andrew. If I had to make like a little circle, like a chart of the book canonicity debate, the center of the debate would be Andrew. Andrew Fright is the middle and center issue of everything, because everything relies on Andrew. And again, a popular theory recently, I made a video about, winks to the camera, is that Andrew is the 6th victim. And if this book says there's only 5 victims, that immediately the issue of Andrew is thrown out the window and people immediately will accept instant time travel if it means that Andrew isn't canon. Which is kind of sad to me, because people really like hating this character. If Andrew isn't canon, we'll accept it. Which is, I think, the main reason I've seen so many people attach themselves to this book is because, oh well, it retcons Andrew. Which I'm so shocked, kind of, that people are willing to ignore all the issues with this book just to be like, oh well, now Andrew's gone. Shrug, now Andrew's gone. Bye-bye, Andrew. Bye-bye, where's the bye-bye, Andrew. Like, well, I think this book has way, way, way bigger issues if it's canon. Mostly with the world building with the time travel, mostly with just the secret ending. The secret ending really bothers me. But let's start at the beginning. What does Return to the Pit do that is strange compared to Into the Pit? The original Into the Pit, because of how it's connected to Frights, implied that, again, the time travel isn't real. And the time travel is you going into a memory and you experiencing that memory in the ball pit. Again, there's blood in the ball pit. There's blood in the ball pit. There's souls in the ball pit, and you going into the ball pit, you can experience the memories of the souls in the ball pit. So it was like, again, memory agony stuff, because again, somebody has been bleeding for 30 years in the ball pit. And at some points, the book reinforced this, like, for example, the ending where you willingly follow the rabbit. Like Oswald talks about how he feels like he's being in someone else's memory, how he's he's being puppeteered by someone else, how he's like just being part of a storyline, which really feels like, oh, this reinforces the memory thing. But then other endings, like you escaping the pizzeria and aging back forward in time, or mostly everything with the Pitvenger storyline, really reinforces like, oh no, this is real time travel. Which causes a lot of issues timeline-wise. And also causes a lot of issues story-wise. I think this causes more issues than, oh well, Andrew exists, you know? Yeah, anyways. But I think the biggest issue is, and the biggest issue this shows with the time travel, is in the Pitvengers storyline. So people want to say, oh well, this book confirms Andrew isn't canon, but at the same time, time travel is still the memory stuff. But the Pitvengers storyline really puts like a wrench into that. And I'll explain it. Like, the Pitvengers is like, once your father is replaced by the rabbit, you can go in 2 directions with the story. You either go down the canon route again, which the book kind of forces you to do, or you go with the Pitvengers route. And the Pitvengers route of the story is you seeing Chip, your friend from the past, in the future as an adult. And he recognizes you. Which means that it probably is real time travel, because if you just enter the memory, why would this person from the memory remember you? So again, Chip remembers you from the past. He remembers playing with you in 1985. Then comes the even bigger issue. The even bigger issue is that Chip and the other people from his group that he was like teaming up with remember the rabbit. Which implies that the organic rabbit is not just a memory manifestation ball pit situation, but is an actual real organic time-hopping rabbit in 1985 that killed 5 children. Which means this book would not just retcon Andrew, this book would retcon William after himself. Because that means that in this continuity, wherever this story takes place, the MCI doesn't happen by the hand of a serial killer wearing a rabbit suit, like William Afton wearing Spring Bonnie and killing 5 children. This means that in this continuity, the murder is committed by a time-hopping organic rabbit, which makes it basically like a Stephen King novel, which is kind of like, oh no. And people are arguing against it, are like, oh no, Chip does remember the rabbit, like he specifically remembers the rabbit, like the organic time-hopping rabbit. And it's not just that, because Chip reveals that there's been other people time traveling with the ball pit, even further past in time. There's been people that have seen the rabbit. Again, he said that the rabbit has been time hopping before. So again, this is not the Yellow Rabbit's first rodeo. He's been doing this before. To the point there's a whole group of people that want to get rid of him. This is literally kind of like It Chapter 2, where it's kind of like all these kids coming together to kill the rabbit. Which causes a lot of issues. Because, yeah, people are kind of like, oh, well, this is more canon because it takes place in a continuity where Andrew doesn't exist. But now the story kind of takes place in a continuity where William Afton doesn't exist. Because in this continuity, there's a time-traveling rabbit that killed 5 children in 1985. Which I think causes more issues. And there are ways people try to work around this. Some people say, well, the Pit Ventures route is not canon, so let's ignore it. But then you also create issues with stuff like, well, the point of an interactive novel, well, yeah, this ending doesn't happen. It does give us canon information, like the fake ending with sister location. It's kind of like saying, oh, well, the private room doesn't exist if the fake ending doesn't happen in sister location. Which isn't true, because the private room very much exists. So again, I don't think that's a valid argument to use. But then the other way is, like the most popular theory at the moment, is Into the Pit loop. Into the Pit loop is a theory that Oswald has been stuck in the ball pit, and every adaptation of the story has been basically him going back and forth in time, like constantly experiencing the same memory in the ball pit. Which I think is an interesting story. My issue mainly is that the book doesn't reinforce it. There's not much evidence in the book that reinforces this idea. The idea that we're in a time loop, or stuck in a time loop. There's only like a few implications of this, like for example, in the Bit game says, if you try to get like the abandoned father ending again, Oswald straight up says, we're not doing this again. Which implies that Oswald experienced the ending before, which is strange. And then there's this book that has like, when Oswald escapes the house and goes to the neighbor's house, for some reason, his neighbors are replaced with Chica. So if like, he knocks on the neighbor's door and Chica opens, which is kind of like, why is there a time-traveling Chica that killed my neighbor? Like, what happened here? What in God's green earth happened here? Which again, I think is like the only strong implication that is like not real time travel. White also made a video about this, you should check out, but again, I don't think the text heavily implies this. The text is just kinda not... Again, it can be one of those things where it's kinda the intention, but the text just doesn't properly imply it. Like, that's just a classic Scott 101, where he tries to imply something, but he doesn't do a good job of it. If Into the Pit loop is supposed to be the intention, I think after 4 adaptations, Scott has not done a proper job communicating this after 4 adaptations of the same story. But that's my main issue. And my biggest issue is the secret ending. The secret ending where we go back in time. That's right, we go back in time, we stop the MCI from happening. We stop the 5 kids from dying. Which is a big issue to me. Because that doesn't only go against the point of Into the Pit, it also kind of goes against the point of the franchise. Like, I made a whole video before the Andrew video about the themes and thematics of Into the Pit. A lot of themes of FNAF and a lot of themes of mostly Into the Pit is that you need to let go of the past. Oswald is a character that holds on to the past and holds on to what once was, instead of moving on with his life. We see these similar themes in other FNAF media, like FNAF 6 is about Henry saying we need to let the past go, we need to move on, we need to make this tragedy end. And there's also Andrew in Stitch Line, where Andrew is not letting go of William, and because of this, he created everything that happened in Stitch Line. Because Andrew didn't let go of William and didn't move on, he caused more hurt. And again, the franchise is a lot about people not moving on from the past causing issues. Also, the FNAF movie does this, like, Mike not moving on from Garrett's death is almost what leads to him losing Abby. Also, the modern games do this too, where the modern games are about the franchise, like Fazbear Entertainment, capitalizing off the past and keeping the past alive because of it. So much of FNAF's themes are about moving on from the past and letting it go, and you not being able to change the past even though you want to change it. But this book is kind of like, well, what if we went back in time and avoided the rabbit from killing his children? Which it goes not only goes against the whole point of the franchise, but also goes against the point of Into the Pit, where Oswald in the end learns how to be grateful with what he has, and again appreciate his dad. Because the story is about him being disrespectful to his dad and putting the blame on his father, while in the end he learns to not put the blame on his father and to be grateful for the family and the things he has in life. Which, again, Return to the Pit kind of throws out the window. So again, what happens? We can get a bonus item, which is a golden coin. So you go back in time with the ball pit. And in the past, in 1985 Freddy's, there's an arcade machine. I don't know what it's called anymore, but it's something like Rabbit Escape or something. But it needs a special golden coin. So if you put the coin in the arcade machine, you're transferred to a 1985 8-bit version of the location. So an 8-bit version of the 1985 location, where you're able to save the children from being murdered. So you basically go to the quote-unquote safe room back area, you untie the kids, you give them cake, and then you win the game. And you winning the game causes the rabbit to die. causes you to go forward in time and causes the MCI to be avoided in the past, which leaves you with a lot of question marks. Because one, why do we need to go to an 8-bit world to make this happen? Second, the rabbit is somehow connected to the arcade machine. And third, why does us playing the arcade machine, like we're not literally going back in time and avoiding the MCI from happening. We're playing a game where we avoid the MCI from happening, and that somehow affects the MCI from not happening in reality. Which I'm kind of like, how does that work? How does that work? It's basically doing a new version of Happiest Day where you give cake to the kids. But then it also kind of stops the real event from happening, which is really confusing. Because again, also goes forward in time, and suddenly Jeff's Pizza is a better location, the MCI never happened, there's a newspaper on the wall of like, 5 children saved from certain death, and an image of a rabbit being handcuffed. And people say, oh well, this image confirms William Afton is canon, because also it says the image is a man in a rabbit suit being handcuffed. But one detail people do not comment on, or people forget, is that the yellow rabbit is all story long mentioned to be a guy in a suit. Also assumes the yellow rabbit is a guy in a suit, all story long. Unless you die by the rabbit's hands and you see his sharp teeth behind his mouth, also does not know that this rabbit is not a guy behind the suit. So an image of the yellow rabbit being arrested would also make Oswald assume it's just a guy in a suit. Because he assumes all book long that the yellow rabbit is just a guy in a suit. So to me, it doesn't really confirm that. I mean, it doesn't make sense that this killer rabbit that killed someone and bit someone's head off can just be arrested by the police. But again, I'm not. It doesn't really make much sense. But again, I'm just going with what the story is going here. And again, this story bothers me because again, it goes against the themes. It goes against the themes of the franchise. We go back in time and avoid the MCI from happening, which goes against the whole themes of the story. And you have to realize that this story where this happens, people consider this the canon one. People consider this the superior canon one. So the canon story that implies there is a ball pit that can avoid the MCI from happening is the one canon to the games. So that means that Mike in the games could have gone to the ball pit anytime to avoid the MCI from happening. Do you really want a timeline where there's a ball pit that could have avoided the main story's narrative the whole time? That is what bothers me. That this goes against the whole narrative of the franchise. And it bothers me a lot. And I really sound annoying now, because I sound similar to people saying like, oh, you think this book is canon? Well, do you want Fazgood to be canon? Like, no, nobody wants Fazgood to be canon. Like, when somebody claims this is canon, they're not saying like, oh, this is canon because I want it to be canon. I think this is canon because it is canon. I don't want to use the same arguments other people use against the books, like, because I don't like the arguments like, oh, you actually want Fazgood and Sea Bonnies and Kids That Play to be canon? You silly goose. Like, that's not a good argument. And I don't want to sound like that when I say this. Yeah, the story bothers me a lot if it is canon, because it goes against those main themes. And the only way to avoid that not being the case is if Into the Pit Loop is canon. But again, I don't think that theory is supported enough or implied enough in the narrative to be the case. So, yeah, Return to the Pit, if it is real time travel, maybe it does retcon Andrew for people, which people are happy about. But it also retcons William Afton and retcons the MCI. So it really feels like Return to the Pit takes place in this separate continuity where Spring Bonnie is just an organic arcade manifestation that killed 5 children in 1985. Which is weird, which is strange. I don't know how to work around that. But again, leave in the comments what you guys feel about this. I know a lot of people made videos covering this. I know Mr. Deskfan made a video about this. I know one of my other friends made a video about this. I can't pronounce their name, sorry. But I'll put the video in the description. I know writers made a video about this. Again, a lot of people tried to cover this topic. And a lot of people went back to, oh, it's also in a time loop. But in my right mind, I can't really say this is the case if the text doesn't heavily imply it. Because again, the text doesn't really imply it. Which probably is the case because Adrian Kress did not know what she was writing for. So, again, I'm really conflicted about Return to the Pit because if I say it isn't canon, then people can question VIP, which VIP is a good piece of media. It also puts these books into question because the book before is clearly canon, like nobody's denying that book is canon. But it also causes, again, more issues with Stitchline. Is canon to Stitchline then? No, because Stitchline does have William Afton in it, so that means that this is awkward, separate continuity, like this separate Return to the Pit continuity. But then the title implies it is canon because it's called Return to the Pit. Again, I haven't wrapped my brain around this book yet. This book has so much personal issues. But I'm gonna leave it here. I've said my thoughts, I've explained why I'm confused about it, and that's where I am at the moment. I'm just kinda like, Return to the Pit is a question mark to me. so far I'll just move on using the games version as the canon version. I'm not gonna just throw Return to the Bit out the window. I'm always gonna consider this book still existing. But I don't want to just say, oh, well, shrug, Andrew is retconned now when every other adaptation does have 6 children. So I think this adaptation just has something goofy going on. Like my friend Caslin suggested that maybe there's only 5 children because they want to do this Happiest Day ending with, again, the time travel stuff. And again, Andrew isn't part of Happiest Day, so I'm gonna leave it here. So again, in the future, I'm just gonna assume the games version is canon and not this one. That doesn't mean that I don't think this one is canon or doesn't have canon elements. I still think it should be taken into consideration. I just think it should be clarified what is going on with this book. I'm gonna be a dirty book denier at this point. But I think this book should be clarified, because I think I have a feeling, and again, this is an assumption, but I have a feeling this book has a similar issue to the movie novelization, where while with The Week Before and VIP, Scott gave the author instruction on what to do, I feel that with Return to the Pit, Scott kind of just gave Adrian Kress, the script of the original story and was like, hey girl, I already wrote the story, just read the original story and make it interactive. I think that's why maybe there's more continuity errors there, because again, similar to the movie novelization, that's like the movie novelization, like most novelizations, it's most likely Scott just giving Andrea Wagner a script of the movie and being like, oh, make this a novel, novelize this, here you go. And I feel with Adrian Kress is the same thing, where because this was an already existing story, they need to make a 10-page summary. So it's kind of like, hey Adrian Kress, here's the already existing story, read it and make it interactive. And I think because of that, Adrian took a lot of creative liberties, and that's why it is the way it is. Because again, these things happen, because again, same happened with the FNAF movie novelization where Doc ended up being a creep when that was not the intention. But then again, you have the debate of is that not just me finding an excuse to discredit it? Is that not me being hypocritical? I feel like I'm being hypocritical when I say that. When I say Adrian Kress didn't know what she was doing. Again, that feels hypocritical. That's discrediting the author. But again, at the same time, you have to take in consideration this could be the case, maybe. I don't like inventing arguments to discredit evidence. But we'll have to see in the future. For now, I think the games version is in the games. I'm sorry, I think that's the most straightforward answer. I think the original story is also still canon, because again, both stories are canon to one another. They're just the same narrative told differently. I'll probably elaborate on my feelings about book canonicity in a future podcast episode, because it's a whole different topic. For now, I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys for listening to my first podcast episode. It probably was a lot of me rambling. I hope you still enjoyed listening to me rambling. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for still being here with me. Thank you for watching my content and supporting me. If you want to support me, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!